Okay, I hope the lighting's done right. I don't know how well this camera's gonna... Okay, there we go. Got everything. And this is my third time trying to do this video. Where's my chess book? Oh, there it is. Okay, in this video we're going to go over the 7 imbalances and find out what they are first. That's what this video will be based upon. And a short, brief summary of what each one is and maybe what it does. And I want you guys to watch this video over and over and over and get this soaked up into your mind, because when you do that, you'll have a good foundation to move on to the next videos, and it'll be a very, very excellent. It's a very excellent way of memorizing these principles of chess and getting your rating up. So the list of imbalances is 1. Minor pieces, 2. Pawn structure, 3. Space, 4. Material, 5. Files and squares, 6. Development, and 7 is initiative. We'll start with the first one, the minor pieces. That's the battle between knights and bishops, what each one likes, and making one stronger than your opponent's, like making your knight stronger than your opponent's knights or bishops, whatever's on the board. So imbalance number 1 is your knights and bishops versus their knights and bishops. You want to make your knight, if there's like, let's say it's like this. You got 2 bishops, he's got 2 knights and a bishop, and you got 1 knight. You want to make your pieces better than his. Bishops like open diagonals, and knights like outposts. And in the next video, we'll go into the minor pieces in more detail. But for now, we're just going over a brief summary of what this imbalance does. When you look at all the minor pieces that are on the board, you know exactly what your opponent's going to be doing. When you put into practice reading the board, you'll see that your opponent's going to want to keep his knights on outposts, and you're going to want to keep his knights away. And his bishop's going to want a good outpost, like right. Say he wants to go right here in the center, or maybe right here in the center, and attack while he's on the flank over here. But he'll be attacking one of the central squares. And you want to keep his knights from coming all the way down in here, just sitting there occupying the squares. Y'all have to forgive me, but this board is, I just got it today, so it's kind of brand spanking new. Usually, black's gonna want to get his knights up in your area on this side of the board down, and you're gonna want to get your knight on this side or this side. So when you're looking at the minor pieces, see who's got what. See that in this position, he had 1 bishop, 2 knights, so he's probably going to want to mostly keep it closed and keep a bishop open on an open diagonal. Keep it on an open diagonal. But see, white might want to open up this whole board because he's got 2 bishops, and both the bishops control each colored square. Now, if you have both of y'all have all 4 pieces, then it's usually up to you to get one of their pieces off, like exchange maybe this for a knight, and then you'll have 2 knights, and then you want to close it up because those bishops won't be that good. And if you can, get rid of this knight with this bishop, so you have both knights, they have both bishops, and you can close this up to where your knights can hop around. So when you're looking at imbalances, the first one is the minor pieces, knights versus bishops, or bishops versus knights. Making your knights and bishops better than theirs, more active, more powerful on the board. The next imbalance is, I believe it's pawn structure. Yeah, pawn structure. This involves, let's see, here we go. Making your pawn structures stronger than theirs, and maybe making a weakness in theirs. So this involves double pawns, isolated pawns maybe. That's an isolated pawn because there's no pawns on either side to defend them. These are double pawns. Backward pawns. This is backward pawn. He's not able to be defended by any pawn, so he's in the back. If he comes up here, he might not be a backward pawn, I don't think. Comes up here, he's definitely not a backward pawn, but since he's all the way in the back. Now if you took this pawn off, he'd still be a backward pawn. If you switched it around, if he ended up 2 moves later moving up here, then this becomes a backward pawn. And you usually want to, at all costs, avoid that. And we got pass pawns. So what a pass pawn is like this situation. In this situation, these are 2 connected pass pawns because there's no pawns that can come on from this side and attack him when they come down. He's a pass pawn because he's got no pawns that can stop him. They can stop him on either side. If this pawn was here, I don't think that's a pass pawn anymore if there's something blocking them, but pass pawn is when there's nothing that could stop them from coming up to queening. He's got no pawn here that he has to worry about. So let's say in this position he goes from this square to this square. He's going all the way up. There's no pawn right here. There's no pawn right here that can say, hey, if you come up here, then I'm going to take you. This pawn's actually over here, so nothing can stop him. He's not got a pawn in front of him to block him or a pawn on either side. So he's free to move up his next moves, and then boom, queen. That's the second imbalance. So we got minor pieces, pawn structure. I believe space is the next one. Let me set this board up all the way. We'll talk about space in a little bit. Actually, I'm going to just keep recording. I'm going to work on editing so it comes out a little bit better. set it up from the starting point. There's quite a bit of pieces. So after a while, I'll end up having these so loose that I'll be able to just slide them right in them. Gotta kind of break them in. Okay, so this next one is space. Now, for example, you got the dust defense, which goes something like D4, F5. That's my favorite closed position. C4, E6. Knight C3, I believe. D5. And let's see. We'll just say Knight F3, Knight C6. You notice, I think this is the Stonewall variation, but you notice it's closed and he's got space in the center. You got two pawns taking this space. You got a pawn attacking this space. This pawn's defending him. This pawn's defending him. This pawn's also defending him. So he scores covered. And White's got space on the queen side. He's got B5 and D5 covered with this pawn. C5, E5 covered with this pawn and this knight. This knight also covers D5 too. So space is how much territory you're taking on the board. Some people might have a queenside space while the other opponent has queenside space, and I'll show you what I mean by that in a little bit. So let's say White's got this going, but Black has and let's say, I don't know, pawn comes up over here. This is just an example. Let's say Black comes over here and pushes up these pawns. And White just comes over here. See, White's got a little bit of king side space, but his queen side space is big. He's taking this territory up. He's occupying these squares on the queen side with his pawns. He's got empty room here to move around in. And he's also preventing Black from controlling some of these squares. The knight can't go here, the knight can't go there. And he's got his queen facing down the center and the king side space. And making sure y'all can see it all the way, okay. And he's got pawns on the king side, so he's taking his space out here on the king side, and White's taking his space out on the queen side, kind of like a fence. He's mapping out his territory. This is my part of the yard. That's your part of the yard. So that's the third imbalance, is space. The fourth one is material. Let's say White loses a knight and a pawn, and black has lost two pieces, a bishop, knight, and a pawn. So what it is he's up in material. You got black who's lost, how do we do this? Bishop, knight, and a pawn. That's seven points. While white has only lost 4 points. A knight and a pawn. So you look at the board and you see, okay, 3 pieces, 2 rooks, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pawns. While black has 2 pieces, which is a piece short of 3 pieces. 2 pieces, 2 rooks, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pawns. So they're both down a pawn, but black is down an extra piece. So material is having more pieces of more value. Like you've taken more pieces off of his side than he's taken of yours. If you're up a knight, you're up in material. And if you're down a knight, you're down in material. If you're down 3 pawns, then you're down in material. Material is how many pieces more, or how many points more than that you have of theirs than they've got of yours. Because each piece has a point value. So if you have 2 pawns that you lost, but he has 4, then you're 2 points ahead because you got 2 more points than he does. And then the value of the pieces helps you know the importance of each piece and how they relate to the value of all the other pieces. Let's see. Material. Vowels and squares is the 5th one. Okie dokie. So we'll go back and we'll go back to that same position. And let's say this pawn got traded off. This pawn got traded off. And this pawn got traded off. Somehow, someway it just did. So you'll see there's no pawns on this file. And there's an empty square. So files and squares. Files are open lines that go vertically up and down. So usually you want to put your rooks there. So you move in this position, you would move your bishop somewhere out of the way, and then you'd move your rook up, and then eventually like move your knight out of the way. Let's just say he goes right here. Boom. What should be difficult? So notice he's got this rook's got this whole open file. Knight obviously can't move in this position because he's pinned. But still, he puts a lot of pressure on this open file. This is an avenue of approach to the enemy king or the enemy position. Because if the king was over there, then obviously it wouldn't be to the king, but it'd be to getting up in this area and doing some damage along the 7th rank. Usually, say somewhere down the road, he as soon as I get this piece of crap in there, usually you want to get both your rooks. Like I say, you get both rooks. You want to get both rooks on the open file, and by doing that, you get a lot of threats going on. Like he's threatening that after you move your king, after black moves his king, and the knight gets taken or travels somewhere along the board, he can always come up over here on the 7th rank and start chasing pieces back and influencing these squares and harassing the enemy king and maybe undermining some of the pawns, like picking off some of the pawns off the 7th rank that are helping defend this front area. So you usually want to get both rooks on open files, and eventually, if you can, put them on the sides, side by side. I mean, that's the files. The squares is me see. Okay, still filming. Got about 10 minutes. The squares is E5 right there. The knight could come there because the pawn's protecting him. Yeah, this knight in this position could take him, but he could just sit there and control squares in the enemy camp, and usually he can't be chased away. If there's knight in here, if both knights are traded off, then he usually just sits there and waits for an opportunity to jump in and threaten everything else. So that's the fifth one, open files and squares. And in the lessons later on, we're gonna figure out how to make use of those, and maybe how to make them happen. Because you can trade off your pieces just right to where you can create holes. But since there's no pawns here to chase the knight off, that's a square. This is but it's not really weak because the rook and the bishop defend it, but if they weren't there, then this might be able to be considered a weak square because the knight could just sit on there and white can eventually push these pawns up and put the bishop to defend. Maybe even in this position put the rook up here to defend the bishop so the bishop can come over here attacking, you know. But you can use these weak squares as vantage points for your knights. So they could just sit there and attack. It's best to have a hole guarded by a pawn, because if there is another piece it could take, then it'll bring the pawn up closer and it'll be attacking two more squares closer, deeper into the enemy's position. And I'm over here talking like enemy position, like it's a war we're going to. Let's see. But this is what usually is a hole. There's a pawn right there, can't push forward. There's no pawns to chase the knights out, and that's what you want your knights to do, is sit in outposts like this, like snipers, and just wait to pick off unsuspecting, you know, queens, rooks, the whole royal family. And open files. But remember, when you can, always double up on your open files. You want these rooks to come barging in. Like Backyard Professor says, these are battering rams. I got battering rams barging into the position, and it's very hard to put in anything on the way, in the way there, because if, for example, he had a, let's say he had a knight, let's say he had a knight right here, so he brought it from here to here. Now, he brought the rook, the knight over to attack the rook. Oh wait, hold on. Let's say the rook moved back down. And let's say the knight moved over here to jump somewhere else eventually. See, with the knight there, he's only guarded by the king with two rooks. If it was one rook, he wouldn't be able to just take it, because then the rook would take, or the king would take the rook. But he's able to take this rook, move him up here, take the knight off, and the rook can't do nothing. And he's choked out here and here. So you always want to get your rooks on open files. I know I always said I would be brief, but this is kind of a big deal. And what was I going to say? It's the minor pieces is a big deal too, but eventually I'm going to go through everything in exact detail. But open files, that's the fifth one, and squares. Fifth, imbalance. The sixth imbalance is development. Hold on, I got like, oh, okay, I got about 5 minutes, so I can hurry. I'm breaking them in though, if you can tell. hurry up, I'm going to run out of time. I want to kind of do all these videos, all these imbalances in one video. Okay. I'm breaking them in though. That's good. I want to ruin it though. So, lead in development is when you have more pieces developed out there in the battlefield than your opponent does. So, yeah, I got about 5 minutes, I'm good. Let's say white comes over here, develops. Black's over here being lazy. He just plays a6, e4, a6. White's faithfully developing all his pieces. Black says, you know what, I got all the time in the world, I'm just going to play b6. Boom. White has developed 2 pieces while black has just been sitting back doing nothing. The reason why, if you can, you want to be up in development is because you'll have more force in this area than your opponent. So you can punch through and do a lot more damage, and they won't have time because their pieces aren't out ready to defend. And right now he's ahead in development because he's got 2 pieces out, while in this position, black's making his first move. He's already developed one piece in 3 moves. 1, 2, and 3. White's turn, 3 pieces. Let's say black goes here. Get over there. And white plays this. Boom. The board's getting on my nerves. Black finally develops a second piece. Now, look at this. All his army's out. 2 bishops, 2 knights, except for the queen and the rook. By the time black gets out a knight, he's going to have probably the queen and the rooks down in the middle. We play here. Let's say black plays there, white plays castles, black plays knight c6, queen e2, castles for black, rook d1, rook to c8. I'm just kind of moving around. Then rook goes to d2, pawn to a5. It comes down to d1, rook a to d1. So he's got all this massive army, and these guys, he's pretty well developed, so are the knights, but he's got way more space. Bishop's cutting right into f7. 2 pawns guard these 2 squares. The knights can jump to any of these squares if they want. And once this pawn gets traded off, he's going to have 2 battering rams aimed at that d pawn. So that's the 6th one, development. The 7th one is initiative, deciding the tempo of the game, making your opponent respond to your threats. So like, boom, perfect example. Pawn moves up. He's got to move now. He's got to take a move and go back, which gives, I think, gives white the